Actually have political analyst Sanusha Naidu to just unpack the developments from KwaZulu-Natal. Sanusha, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. Firstly, your reaction to the election of Thami Ntuli, IFP leader in KwaZulu-Natal as the Premier.
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. Yeah, I mean, I think we knew that KwaZulu-Natal was going to be quite a difficult province because the numbers don't necessarily suggest that coalition that we see in terms of the GNU with the ANC, DA, IFP, those numbers are quite interesting. I mean, you kind of moving with a 40-39, a 41-39, a 40-39. So those numbers are not necessarily telling us that coalition that is there, that's holding for now, with the election of Thami Ntuli, with the election of the DA candidate for deputy speaker, and of course the election of the IFP candidate re-election as speaker of the legislature. It tells you that it's okay, but it's not really going to be that kind of okay in a sense, because it's still a very fragile coalition, and I think that's what makes it quite interesting, if not also very volatile for the province, because those numbers can shift, and that's what makes this an unsteady coalition in the province.
But Sanusha, when reading his body language and just what he stated, he seemed quite confident, unperturbed, because the question was posed to him that essentially there is a degree of fragility there, 45% to the MK party. But as I was stating to my colleague now, Bongiwe, that he turned that question on its head and stated that the inverse is true. 55% of the citizens of KwaZulu-Natal did not vote for the MK party.
Well, that's true. And I think it's important, Mfundo, to bear in mind that right now we're in really early days of this coalition of the GNU. And this kind of grand coalition that we're talking about, remember that KwaZulu-Natal was the one province where it was still uncertain what kind of talks MK will have. Now, remember, one of the things that we kept hearing from the leadership of the MK was about the election results, and of course the question now would be, what would be that press briefing or the address that MK has released, that former President Jacob Zuma is going to have a address, and what does it mean? And I think when you look at 37 versus 41, because that's the total number of seats that the coalition of the ANC, DA, and IFP have in the province. Yes, you can be really optimistic and upbeat for it now, but let the situation start to go forward when you have to start to get down to real business of governing and governance. And then we're going to see what's going to be the stalling tactics, what are going to be the disruptors, and what are going to be the inhibitors to what MK may say with the 37 seats they have, and how this will play out in the context of legislation and going forward in governing the province.
But on the part of the MK party, were there any missteps insofar as moving with speed, perhaps to put together some sort of governing structure of their own in KwaZulu-Natal?
Well, I think, the issue with the MK party is, as we sit here in the ICC today and we're waiting for the votes to be tallied for the deputy speaker position, you can see the visible absence of the MK party as MPs in terms of the 58 MPs that haven't turned up here. And I suspect that's par for the course for the MK. It's a tactic, it's a strategy, and of course they'll come back with some kind of issue to say that they didn't really believe that the 37 votes and their 45% was a real reflection of their performance.
I want us to look at the role of the NFP. They were the kingmakers here. The NFP swayed it in favor of the government of provincial unity. The Democratic Alliance is part of this government of provincial unity, but a Democratic Alliance that has been quite vocal on its issues around the amount of power that smaller parties have wielded over the years, particularly at local government level, because that's where we were seeing the coalitions where they said they believed their powers need to be curtailed because just at the stroke of a pen or somebody having a negotiation on the side with a smaller party, a whole government could be collapsed. They even went as far as putting it on paper in their 5-point plan for stabilizing coalitions back in 2022 in preparation for 2024. But now they are the beneficiaries of a small party that has voted for their co-governing structure. Your views?
Mfundo, remember, what was fascinating is that the DA had been very vitriolic and aggressive and combatant when you looked at them on the election trail. I mean, I think they called smaller political parties, if I'm not mistaken, John Steenhuisen called them political mercenaries. I mean, today you're sitting not just in the context of the NFP as a small party that is getting the DA into this GNU coalition, but look at the fact that you've got the Patriotic Alliance that's also there. And there's been a very aggressive stance and a very confrontational stance between the way the DA has structured this. And what is fascinating is when you listen to John Steenhuisen today in the press briefing here at the IFP, he actually talks about the fact that now we are co-governing partners. So a day in politics is a day too much. It can shift your dynamics. But I think that's interesting right now. Those kinds of that kind of talk has to now be considered as where do you put it? Do you continue that kind of talk, or do you now make this GNU work? And that has been an interesting dynamic when you listen to what they're talking about in terms of being partners in this, in co-governing at the national level.
Sanusha, very interesting times. Certainly we'll be speaking to you as the days progress on what unfolds now, because we do hear that there will be some sort of a lekgotla where the policies will now be discussed. Many can believe that's going to be a very heated conversation. But thank you very much for joining us this evening. That's political analyst Sanusha Naidu.